Well, it's been a minute, hasn't it? I looked at the date of the last episode the other day and I nearly spat my tea out. The 1st of June. In my head, it's been about 2 weeks. In reality, we've somehow disappeared into an entire month and ended up here. And honestly, that pretty much sums up life recently. If you've been wondering where I've vanished off to, don't worry. I haven't fallen off the face of the earth. I haven't quit. I haven't gone off grid and become some sort of mountain hermit. I haven't been cancelled. I've just had one of those periods where everything seems to happen at once. You know when you think you've got a plan and life hears that plan and goes, that's cute. So first up, we had a family holiday to the Lake District. Absolutely beautiful place. Mountains, lakes, fresh air, just incredible scenery. The sort of place that makes you realise you've spent far too much time sitting at Teams meetings and not enough time staring at actual nature. Although before we got there, the camper van decided it wanted to add a bit of drama to the situation. It went in for some work, which in theory should have been straightforward. You know how these things go. Take it in, get the repair done, pick it up, crack on. Lovely jubbly. Except they carried out the repair and then found more issues, because apparently vehicles, like everything else in life, enjoy waiting until the worst possible moments to reveal their full list of problems. So instead of arriving at the lakes when we planned, with my parents and my daughters, we ended up being delayed by about 36 hours. Which doesn't sound like much until you're the one trying to coordinate family plans, bags, food, timings, and general chaos that comes with trying to get everyone in the place at the same time. But we got there in the end, and once we did, it was brilliant. We made up for the delay properly. Lots of paddleboarding, ice cream, games, general laughs, and everything. It was fantastic. Loads of those moments where everyone's laughing, the weather's decent, and you just think, yeah, this is exactly what we needed. The funny thing is, holidays always remind me how terrible I am at relaxing. You spend ages looking forward to the break and then spend the first couple of days wondering if you've forgotten to reply to an email that nobody cares about. Then eventually your brain starts to switch off and you remember what normal life is supposed to feel like. So the holiday was fantastic. Then we came home and immediately walked into absolute chaos. Because the week after we got back, we moved house. And not in a calm, measured, organised sort of way either. I mean the full mad rush, packing for a holiday and packing up a whole house at the same time. Which, in hindsight, was a terrible idea. At the time you tell yourself, it'll be fine. You think, we'll just get it all done. And then suddenly surrounded by boxes. Boxes in every room, boxes in the hallway, boxes stacked in corners, boxes with labels on them that make absolutely no sense 3 days later. The whole house was upside down. Everything was out, nothing was where it should be. And because we're trying to get ready for the holiday at the same time, it felt like we were living in two different kinds of chaos at once. One minute you're trying to remember whether you've packed enough clothes for the Lake District, the next you're trying to find a kettle because somehow it's in a box named miscellaneous kitchen. It was relentless. And what really got to me was how stressed it made me, without even properly realising it. That's the strange thing about chaos. You don't always notice it straight away. You just start feeling off, a bit more tired, a bit more irritable, a bit less patient than usual. And at first you think it's just because you've got a lot on, but actually it was the house. It was the constant mess, the lack of structure, the fact that nothing felt settled for weeks, and I never really knew how much I liked structure until it disappeared. I can cope with a few days of things being a bit uneasy, and a few days of disruption, that's fine. A few days living out of boxes is manageable. But when it goes on for weeks, it starts to wear you down in a way you don't fully clock until you stop and look back at it. Because when your environment is chaotic, your head starts to feel chaotic too. And that was before work decided it wanted to join the party. Because during all this disruption, I had a pretty nasty crash at work. Now, I'm not turning this into a medical podcast, but the aftermath has been rough. Whiplash is one of those injuries that just sounds fairly minor until you actually have it. People hear whiplash and think sore neck. The reality is your entire body starts acting like it's forgotten how to cooperate. There were days where lifting simple things felt ridiculous, days where turning my head became an event, days where even getting comfortable was a challenge. 8 weeks later and I'm still dealing with bits of it. It's getting better, but it definitely has forced me to slow down. And if you're anything like me, slowing down isn't easy because we're all conditioned to keep going, keep producing, keep working, keep achieving, keep moving. And then life occasionally comes along and reminds you that you're actually human, and humans have limits. Which brings me on to something I've been thinking about a lot recently. The phrase my family and I use quite a lot at a time is, what a time to be alive. Sometimes we say it when something amazing happens. Sometimes we say it when completely ridiculous things happen. Sometimes we say it when life decides to throw three different challenges at you in the space of a month. But the more I think about it, the more I realize it's actually a mindset. Because life isn't always neat, it isn't always convenient, it isn't always progressing exactly how you planned. Sometimes you're delayed by a camper van that decides to develop more issues after the repair's been done. Sometimes you're on a holiday in one of the most beautiful places in the country with your parents and your kids, paddleboarding, eating ice cream and playing games. The next week, you're surrounded by cardboard boxes. The week after that, you're dealing with an injury, and somehow it all becomes part of the same story. And despite all the chaos, despite the stress, despite the frustration, you can still step back and appreciate the fact that you're here experiencing good bits, the difficult bits, the funny bits, the ridiculous bits, all of it. So that's where I've been. That's why the podcast went quiet, not because I lost interest, not because I stopped caring. Life just happened. And if there's one thing that this last month has reminded me of, it's that just sometimes you don't need a perfect plan. You just need to get back on the horse and keep moving. So that's exactly what we're doing. The podcast is back. I've got plenty to talk about, plenty of stories to share, and plenty of thoughts about modern life that will probably get me into trouble. But for now, it's good to be back, and genuinely, what a time to be alive.